If you stood in exactly the right spot in the Harrow hallway where the floorboard didn't creak and the banister spindles lined up like a cage, you could watch 3 stories happen at the same time. And here's the thing. The story you choose to believe says more about you than it does about them. Before we start, if you want the rest of this tale and more Southern stories that peel the paint off the pretty versions, hit like now, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which story you think you'd believe if you were standing in that hall at 10 o'clock. The first story was the one everyone wore like church clothes. A delicate plantation lady too fragile to manage the stairs after a terrible fall, being dutifully carried to bed by the strongest man on the property because a city doctor ordered it. Clean. Proper. Nothing to see here. The second story lived in whispers passed between kitchens and pews, salted with smirks and moral outrage. A white woman who'd discovered she liked the feel of a slave's arms around her and demanded it nightly, pretending it was medicine while everyone pretended not to stare. And then there was the third story, the one nobody said out loud because it came with a villain you weren't supposed to name. The third story was uglier. It was blood on polished wood. It was power in a man's hand. It was a staircase that didn't just bruise a body, it rearranged an entire household's fate. And it began on a storm night when the lamps hung crooked and the big house sounded like it was breathing through its teeth. The first time Samson carried Lavinia Harrow up those stairs, nobody thought to watch. The storm had slammed in off the marsh like it was angry at being ignored. Wind shoved rain against shutters. Wet branches clawed the glass. Even the air inside the house felt unsettled, tasting of soot and old varnish. The lamps. Those polite pools of light had been knocked askew earlier, so the hallway stretched into shadow, and every corner looked like it could hold a temper. The servants moved fast. That night, heads lowered, bodies angled sideways to make themselves smaller. In a house like Harrow, you learned early that the safest shape was invisible. The safest sound was none at all. Thaddeus Harrow. Major Harrow, when he wanted to be feared, was already loud before the overseer even dragged Mariah in from the quarters. Mariah's wrists were tied, her dress clung damp to her sides, and her belly was round and tight the way a moon is tight when it's swollen with light. She wasn't far along enough to hide it. She was far enough along that you couldn't pretend not to see. She lied. Thaddeus slurred as if the word itself tasted sour. His riding crop dangled from his fingers like an extension of his mood. She stole. She sassed me. Mariah stood still. Her face had that careful emptiness some people call obedience and others call survival. She asked if you were drunk, Mariah said, voice flat as a board. That should have been the end of it. A smart man, a sober man, might have laughed, might have barked something about insolence and slept it off. But Thaddeus wasn't smart in that moment, and he wasn't sober. He was a man used to the world giving way when he leaned on it. Lavinia Harrow came to the bottom of the stairs with her fingers pressed into the banister like she could steady the entire house by force of will. She had never liked scenes like this, never liked how anger echoed in expensive halls, how the crack of leather on skin seemed to stain the walls. But this time she saw Mariah's belly and panic flared so sharp it felt like fire under her ribs. That is enough, Lavinia said quietly. She's heavy with child. Whatever you think she's done, you can wait. You don't have to, Elise Lavinia's maid whispered, but it was swallowed by the storm and the major's breathing. You will not tell me how to run my house, Thaddeus snapped. The crop twitched in his hand like something alive. He stepped past Lavinia, boots clacking on wet wood. Lavinia moved without thinking, putting her body between him and Mariah. Maybe she thought he would stop. Maybe she forgot how much whiskey was in his blood. He didn't stop. His hand shot out and shoved her shoulder, not with full force, not enough to bruise her face. He was still gentleman enough to avoid leaving marks that would have to be explained later. But it was hard enough. Her heels slid. The world tilted. For one sick heartbeat, there was no up, no down, only the sensation of the staircase yanking itself out from under her. Then the edge of a step slammed into her back. Her head struck wood. Light went white, then black. When Lavinia opened her eyes again, she was being carried. Not by Thaddeus, not by the overseer, by someone whose chest was solid and hot against her cheek, whose breath came hard but steady, whose hands were trying so desperately not to squeeze too tight. "Don't you sleep, Mrs. Harrow," a deep voice whispered near her ear. "Don't you close your eyes. You stay with me here." Her eyelids fluttered. She caught a glimpse of a jaw, the curve of a throat, a drop of her own blood running down a sleeve that wasn't hers. "Samson," someone said behind them, careful with her neck. Samson. Harrow. No. Samson belonged to Harrow the way a plow belonged to a field. Samson was the biggest man on the place, the strongest back under the major's ledger. And right then, in the flicker of crooked lamplight, he carried Lavinia Harrow into her bedroom and didn't set her down until the doctor told him to. Later, after the doctor's hands stopped being gentle and his words turned from Latin to English, truths, Lavinia lay stiff as a corpse and listened as if the room were underwater. There was a child, the doctor said, voice low so it wouldn't carry through the door. There is not now. Lavinia stared at the ceiling. Her own body felt like a stranger's house. "Your fall did that, Mrs. Harrow." "I'm sorry." A pause. The doctor cleared his throat like a man moving furniture. "Does he know?" Lavinia whispered. The doctor hesitated. "Your husband was indisposed that evening. I doubt he remembers much after his third glass. I've informed him you've been unwell. I did not give him particulars. Who knows? The girl who changed your bloodied sheets," he said. "Myself. And the man who pulled you off the floor and carried you before you bled out." Lavinia shut her eyes. Behind them, she saw not Thaddeus's face, but Samson's wet with rain and sweat, jaw-clenched gaze averted even as her blood soaked into his shirt. Outside the door, the house creaked in the wind, old wood shifting like it was remembering every scream it had swallowed. "When you are strong enough," the doctor added, "you must decide what to tell. For now, you must not strain. No stairs, no sudden movements. Your spine has been jarred badly. I won't say you'll never climb again, but if you fall once more, I do not trust you will stand afterward." "How do I move?" Lavinia asked dully. "Float." The doctor gave a small, awkward laugh that died quickly. "You have strong men on this place, Mrs. Harrow. You will have to borrow their backs." Borrow their backs. Lavinia did not choose Samson. The doctor did. "The biggest one you have," he told Elise as he packed away his instruments. "The one who lifted her last night. He knows her weight." So they sent for Samson. He came into the room with his hat in his hands, shoulders hunched the way a man does when he expects a blow. He stood by the bed without looking directly at Lavinia as if the fall were his fault. "Can you lift Mrs. Harrow up and down the stairs until she's stronger?" the doctor asked. "Yes, sir," Samson murmured. The words tasted like rope. He slid his arms under her as careful as if she were made of thin glass. Lavinia felt her body leave the mattress, the drag of the sheets, the stretch in his shoulders. His chest was a wall beneath her every breath, like the slow bellows of a blacksmith's fire. Pain flared in her back, then settled into something sharper and steady. "Don't be shy," the doctor said briskly. "If she clutches, let her. Fear will jerk her more than your muscles will." So Lavinia clutched. She wrapped her arm around Samson's neck, fingers, digging into linen at his collar, tilting the weight of her body closer so the jostle of each step wouldn't twist her spine. It was a shameless grip, the kind she would never have dared with any man before. Necessity tore that dainty limit away. He carried her into the upstairs hall. The staircase yawned below like the open mouth of an animal that had already bitten her once. Her stomach lurched. She felt Samson's muscles tighten, bracing. "One step at a time, Samson," the doctor instructed. Slow and steady. The first bump of Samson's boot on the top stair made the room spin. Lavinia gasped and buried her face against his shoulder. His shirt smelled of soap and smoke and something earthy. His heartbeat thudded against her cheek. He didn't speak. He just moved each step, deliberate eyes on the path, every part of him bent toward one job. Do not drop her. By the time they reached the hall below, sweat had darkened the cloth at Samson's chest. Lavinia's hands had twisted the fabric into little ropes. Servants had gathered, pretending they hadn't, hovering in doorways, corners, shadows. Lavinia made herself look up. Pride was injured as badly as her back, but she would not let them see her as luggage. "Thank you, Samson," she said softly when he set her in a chair. His eyes flickered to her face for the briefest moment, dark, startled, weary, then dropped. "Yes, Mrs." From that day, the doctor's orders became part of the house. 10 o'clock. The tall clock in the hall begins to chime, solemn as a funeral. Samson steps out of the shadows to carry Mrs. Harrow to bed. At first, only the Harrow household knew the shape of the ritual. Field hands heard it secondhand. Neighbors only heard that Mrs. Harrow had had a fall, that she walked with a cane when she walked at all, that a city doctor declared the staircase a danger. But nothing in a place like that stays small for long, especially not when it looks like the thing people already want to see. Cora arrived just in time to catch it. She came in August when the heat had boiled all the color out of the fields and the air tasted like boiled linen. Cora stepped down from her carriage with a smile too wide for the dusty road dress, just slightly out of fashion bonnet hiding the way her eyes scanned the property like she was counting exits. "Cousin Lavinia," she breathed, grasping Lavinia's hands with a little drama of shock. "You look so pale." "Oh, I heard you'd had an accident, but I didn't imagine." "I am still here," Lavinia said. "The gossip must be losing its touch." Cora laughed too brightly. "Oh, you know how it is. They said you tripped over your own pride and fell down the stairs trying to command a thunderstorm." "Then the storm must be more obedient than my husband," Lavinia replied. "Come inside. You'll melt." That night, while the house settled into its creaks and sighs, Cora wandered. She discovered quickly that Harrow House held secrets the way an old trunk holds cedar scent. Doors that stuck just before they closed. Stairs that squeaked on the 7th step, but not the 5th. And a patch of floor in the hall where if you stood just right, you could see up the staircase through the spindles without anyone noticing you. When the clock began its slow chime, Cora happened to be standing in that patch. Lavinia appeared at the bottom of the stairs, cane in hand, Elise fluttering near her elbow. From the opposite side of the hall, Samson stepped into lamplight. Cora knew in an abstract way that enslaved people were made to be strong. Their strength was part of the price. But seeing Samson up close was different. He was taller than any man Cora had ever danced with at a ball, shoulders wide enough to block the light. His skin had the deep burnished tone of wet earth. His hands looked like they could snap a banister in half, and he was about to put them on Lavinia. Cora's breath caught. Lavinia didn't hesitate. She reached toward Samson. He bent knees, flexing arms, sliding under her knees and back, as if they had done it 100 times. Lavinia let her weight settle into him, her hand curling around his neck, her hair brushing his jaw. For an instant, her face turned toward his. She said something Cora couldn't hear. Samson straightened, and the two of them became one shape moving through the hall. Servants pretended they were invisible, staring at floors, hands a blank spot on the wall, but you could feel their attention like heat. Samson started up the stairs. The wood creaked under the combined weight. Lavinia's white nightgown glowed against his dark arms. Her bare feet dangled just above each step before he lifted her higher, carrying her away from the floor that had betrayed her. Cora watched until they turned at the landing and vanished into shadow. Her cheeks were hot. Her heart pounded like she had done something wrong herself. When she told it later, she would not mention Lavinia's face pinched tight with pain when Samson lifted her. She would not mention the way Samson's eyes stayed fixed on the steps, never straying to the curve of her body. Cora would tell it like this: I saw her in his arms, head on his chest, and she looked content. It is funny how much damage the wrong adjective can do. By Sunday, Reverend Croft's sermon had shifted. He always liked to thunder about sin in the abstract pride, vanity, sloth, plucking verses like ripe figs. This time his voice took on a sharper edge. "There is an order to creation," he boomed, sweat shining on his brow. "God said it so. White and black, master and servant, man and wife. And woe to any woman who forgets that her body is a temple that must not be handled by unclean hands." Fans fluttered. Pew wood creaked as people shifted. Nobody turned their head, but Lavinia felt the weight of every eye pressing into the back of hers. Beside her, Cora bowed her head piously. In the women's section, planters' wives exchanged glances over lace like it was a shared language. On Monday, Elise came to Lavinia, twisting her apron. "Mrs. Harrow." Elise whispered, "Mrs. Croft, say her girls can't come here no more. Says we harbor something indecent, because I can't walk." Lavinia asked flatly. Elise swallowed. "Because of how you go upstairs." Lavinia laughed once, sharp and brittle. "That staircase has done more damage to me than any man. But I suppose it's only polite to blame the nearest body." She tried to walk again a week later. After dinner, when the hall was mostly empty, Lavinia sent Samson back to the quarters early. "Tonight I'll manage," she told Elise. "I'm not made of paper." She made it halfway. Her right foot forgot what it was supposed to do. Pain shot up her spine, so sudden and savage, she saw stars. Her hand slipped on the polished rail. For a terrifying moment, the weight of her whole life tilted toward the same emptiness she'd fallen into before. She caught herself with both hands, knuckles wide, chest pressed against the banister legs, shaking so hard the floor seemed to wobble. Sweat stung her eyes. Elise cried out. Somewhere behind Lavinia, a boy sucked in breath. "Don't!" Lavinia gasped. "Stay back!" She forced herself up one step, then another. By the time she reached the landing, she was nearly on all fours, dress bunched around her knees, hair sticking damp to her neck. Even the ghosts in the house seemed to hold their breath. She closed her bedroom door on their eyes and listened to her own heart hammer against wood. The next night, when Samson came at 10, Lavinia didn't even pretend. "You will carry me," she said calmly when he stepped out of the shadows. "Yes, Mrs.," he replied. She heard someone behind them stifle a laugh or a sob. She couldn't tell which. Cora, leaning in a doorway, watched the scene like a person watching smoke, already deciding which direction it would drift. In kitchens, the talk grew teeth. "Think he got charms on her," one woman muttered while scrubbing pots. "Think she'd like it?" Another whispered. "Think you ought to hush," a third hissed. "Walls got ears." "It ain't the walls we got to worry about," came the reply. "It's them white tongues." Samson walked by, carrying a bucket of coal eyes straight ahead. Words slid over him like hot grease. He had become a symbol without his consent. And symbols don't live long on land like Harrow. Isaiah was the one who put it into words. The old man sat on an overturned crate by the woodpile, hair white as cotton, eyes clouded. He could barely see, but he could smell trouble the way a dog smells lightning. "You know what happened when a tale get too pretty, boy," Isaiah rasped. Samson set the bucket down careful, like the sound might wake something. "Folks repeat it," he said tightly. Isaiah nodded. "They repeat it till they need a neck to tie the ending to. A story don't feel done till something swing." Samson's hand clenched around the bucket handle. He thought of the tree near the far fence, the one with the branch bent in a way that looked too practiced. He thought of a letter he'd once seen the overseer burning the fear in the man's face when he thought no one watched. "What you want me to do?" Samson asked quietly. "Drop her." Isaiah snapped his head like a lash. "Did I say that? I said watch where the story go. Watch whose hand's holding the rope when it get there." 2 weeks later, the letter came thin paper folded with no return address. Major Harrow opened it in a tavern in Savannah, already half drunk on whiskey and self-importance. He read the single sentence 3 times before it sank into his blood. "Your wife is not going up to bed alone." He crushed the paper in his fist and ordered his horse saddled at dawn. When his carriage rolled up Harrow Drive, the dust hadn't settled from his last departure. The fields looked the same. The house looked the same paint, same tall windows catching sun like mirrors. But the servants stood different, shoulders tighter, eyes flicking toward the staircase like it had become a mouth. Lavinia, Thaddeus said, striding onto the veranda. "Thaddeus?" She replied, hands folded in her lap cane resting against the chair. He looked older than when he'd left, more gray at his temples, deeper lines carved around his mouth. His uniform hung a little looser, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "I hear you've taken to fainting on my stairs," he said. "I fell on your stairs," she corrected. "Once. The rest is embroidery." His gaze slid to the cane, then to her feet. "They say you can't manage them anymore without help." "They say many things," Lavinia murmured, "most of them about other people's beds." His jaw ticked. He said nothing more about it that afternoon. He did not ask about Samson. He didn't have to. He waited the way men like him always waited, confident the house would hand him evidence if he simply let it. On the 3rd night, he got his answer. He stood in shadow at the far end of the hall just beyond the lamplight and listened to the clock begin its slow toll. He heard the soft pad of slippers upstairs, then the heavier, deliberate tread of Samson. Lavinia appeared first, leaning on Elise. Samson came down a few steps to meet her. He did not know the Major was watching. No one had told him. In a place like Harrow, you did not warn a man like Samson about a man like Thaddeus. You let the danger arrive in its own boots. Samson bowed as much as he could while keeping balance. Lavinia slid her arm around his neck and he lifted her. Thaddeus watched his wife's body rise into another man's arms. He watched her fingers tighten in fabric over Samson's shoulder. He watched the way her head tilted when the staircase creaked, the way her bare toes hovered above wood. He watched Samson's face, expressionless jaw set, gaze locked not on the woman he carried, but on the path ahead. They passed within 6 feet of him. Samson did not look up. Lavinia's eyes were trained on the landing, fixed like a woman walking a tightrope. Thaddeus said nothing until the bedroom door closed upstairs. Later in Lavinia's room, he stood too close, anger hot off him like steam. "The whole house sees this," he said. "Every night. The whole house sees a man doing the job your doctor assigned him," she replied. "And what does the town see?" Thaddeus demanded. "Because I have had letters, Lavinia. Men smirk when I walk into taverns. Women lower their voices when I pass. That is not just your doctor's doing." Lavinia held his gaze. "The town sees what it wants. A dog will always find a bone." Thaddeus leaned in. "And what do you want me to see?" For once, Lavinia did not soften it. "I want you to see what you did on those stairs." His hand clenched around the back of a chair. "I did not push you. You pushed me aside," she said. "You were drunk and angry. You shoved me as if I were one of your servants." Her voice rose. "You raised your hand in a hall full of witnesses, and you still think your intention matters more than what happened. You dare!" I fell. Lavinia continued, not letting him speak, "and I lost the child." The words landed like stones. Thaddeus's face darkened. "The doctor told me while you slept," Lavinia said. "Samson carried me through my own blood." "You want to talk about what people see? They see him carrying your guilt up and down these stairs every night because you cannot bear to put your own hands on the consequences." His palm cracked across her cheek before he even realized he moved. The sound rang in the room like another bell. Lavinia did not cry out. She stared at him, fury silver bright in her eyes. The Major's hand lowered slowly, like it belonged to a stranger. "Tomorrow night," he said hoarsely, "every person in this house will stand in that hall at 10 o'clock. Every white, every black, every child old enough to stand. And they will see exactly what their mistress and the big buck she favors do on my stairs. If you've ever watched the internet pile onto someone you know this moment, this is where the comments section starts warming up. This is where people who were bored 5 minutes ago suddenly have opinions like they were born holding them. This is where a story stops being about truth and starts being about entertainment. Samson didn't sleep that night. He lay on his pallet staring at rafters, counting knots in the wood like numbers could protect him. The quarters muttered and sighed. A rooster crowed too early and got cursed for it. Heat sat on the night like a hand on a throat. Elise warned him that afternoon in the pantry, voice tight. Major's furious. He's got that look like when the river rose and the crop failed, like he might hit the sky if it was nearer. What does he want? Samson asked, though he already knew. He wants a show, Elise said. He wants to break something that can't fight back. Just keep your head down. Don't say a word. Don't even breathe hard, as if his breathing had ever mattered before. Upstairs, Lavinia sat at her writing desk while the candle guttered low. Her cheek still burned where Thaddeus struck her. Her back ached so deep it felt older than she was. Her hand shook as she dipped the pen. She wrote not to anyone in particular, but to keep her mind from splitting under pressure. They will watch me either way, she wrote. If I walk, they will watch to see if I fall. If I refuse to come out, they will watch my door and imagine what happens behind it. If I let him carry me, they will watch and see only what they already suspect. She paused, listening to the house breathe, listening to the way fear makes even quiet sounds louder. Samson has seen me at my worst, she wrote. He has held me in blood and sweat and terror. He has never asked me for anything. The town will forgive my husband anything. They will never forgive me for letting a man beneath me lay hands on my skin even to save my life. Then she did something she had never done before she left the page on the desk uncovered. She did not lock the drawer. If the house wanted a story, she would leave a different one lying around for someone to find. At 10 o'clock, the hall was packed. White servants lined one wall as stiff as broomsticks. Elise stood near the bottom of the stairs, twisting her hands until her knuckles whitened. The cook and the stable boy and the scullery girl stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes darting like trapped birds. Across from them, enslaved field hands and house servants clustered together, faces set in the careful mask worn when any white man's temper might erupt. Old Isaiah sat on a stool by the door. His cloudy eyes turned toward the stairs as if he could still see them. Outside, beyond the open front door, neighbors gathered with lanterns bobbing like disembodied eyes. They claimed they were there because the major mentioned a family matter, but their posture said spectacle. Their silence said hunger. Thaddeus stood at the foot of the stairs, arms folded, boots polished, jaw clenched. He looked like a man about to address a regiment, not a wife. The clock began to toll. Upstairs, the bedroom door opened. Samson stepped out first, face carved from stone. He walked to the midpoint of the staircase and turned, waiting. Lavinia appeared a moment later. She had chosen her dress carefully clean, not elaborate, a simple cream gown falling soft around her ankles. Her hair hung loose down her back, an intimacy that would scandalize half the women in that hall and thrill the other half. She did it on purpose. She lifted her chin and descended a few steps to where Samson waited. Pain stabbed deep, but she did not let it show. "Ready?" she murmured. "Yes," Mrs. Samson said. He bent. Lavinia let herself fall into his arms one more time. As Samson straightened, Lavinia saw the whole hall tilt and rearrange itself into faces Elise's wet eyes. Cora's pale, strained attention. Reverend Croft's wife pressed near the door, as if sin might slip away if she blinked. Thaddeus at the bottom, gaze hot as a brand. Samson took one step, then another. On the fourth step, Lavinia pressed her hand to Samson's chest. "Stop," she said. Samson stopped. The hall held its breath. Even the lanterns outside seemed to still. Thaddeus's voice cut through the silence. "What is this?" Lavinia turned her head, resting her cheek near Samson's shoulder, and looked down at the crowd. Her voice was clear when she spoke the way a person's voice gets when they have decided fear will no longer speak for them. You've all been watching this for months, she said. You've watched him carry me. You've watched my feet leave the floor. Tonight, you're supposed to see something else, aren't you? Something filthy. Something you can whisper about on Sundays. No one moved. Cora Lavinia said, eyes finding her cousin near the back. How have you been telling it in town? Cora's face flamed. I only said what anyone could see. Anyone? Lavinia asked softly. Anyone see the night my husband raised his hand to a pregnant woman and knocked his own wife down the stairs? Anyone see the blood on these boards? Anyone see Samson kneeling in it, trying to keep my head from cracking open like an egg? A murmur rippled through the hall. Elise's hand flew to her mouth. Isaiah bowed his head like prayer. Thaddeus took a step up. Lavinia, he hissed. You will not. I will, she cut in. Because you invited them all in to see. So let them see all of it. She drew a shaky breath. The night I fell, she said you were drunk. You had Mariah dragged into this hall, wrists bound belly round. You meant to whip her. I begged you to stop. You pushed me aside. You still don't remember. Do you? Thaddeus's mouth opened. No sound came out. I fell, Lavinia said. I lost our child. The doctor told me while you slept. Samson carried me upstairs so I didn't bleed to death on your stairs. Since then, I have not trusted these steps. I trust his arms. That is all. That is what you all have been watching. Her words dropped into the silence like stones into water. On the white side, faces went pale or darkened with shame. On the black side, people stood so still they could have been carved, but something electric ran between them, eyes flicking, understanding passing without speech. Reverend Croft's wife pressed a hand to her throat. You expect them to pity you? Thaddeus spat, finding his voice at last. To take the word of a woman half out of her mind from pain over their master, I expect them to recognize a pattern, Lavinia said. Isaiah does. Every head turned toward the old man. Isaiah straightened slowly. His voice was rasped thin by years and smoke, but it carried because truth tends to do that when lies are tired. I seen your daddy do near the same, Isaiah said. Not with a whip, but with how he talked. How he put blame on backs already carrying enough. I seen a girl sent away with a belly like Mariah's and a bruise on her jaw, and nobody in this house said a word. Rumor said she tempted him. Rumors still say that when folks want to talk about wild blood. Isaiah smiled a little, showing 2 brown stumps of teeth. Funny how rumor always pick a black neck when it need hanging. Silence. Thaddeus snapped. You will be silent, old man. Isaiah's smile widened. I ain't got enough years left to be scared of your anger, Major. Sweat stood out on Thaddeus's forehead. He stepped up another stair until he was only 3 below Samson. He looked up at Lavinia's body in Samson's arms as if it were a theft. Put her down, Thaddeus said. Put her in my arms. This ends now. Samson's whole body went tight. He was trapped on the staircase below him, the man who owned his life around him, 100 eyes judging every flex above him, the landing that might be salvation or a dead end. He couldn't tell. Major Samson said carefully, voice low, if I put her down here, she going to fall. And if she fall, that doctor say she might not get up no more. Don't tell me what my wife can do, Thaddeus snarled, taking another step. Lavinia felt the tremor in Samson's arms, the collision of fear and duty. And in that instant, she understood something no one ever wanted to admit. She was not the only person on that staircase in danger of shattering. Thaddeus Lavinia said, if you want someone to blame, blame me, not him. I'm the one who told the doctor he would carry me. I'm the one who clung. If there is sin in that, let it sit on my soul, not his shoulders. Thaddeus's mouth twisted into a terrible smile. Oh, don't worry. There's more than enough sin to go around. The town will be glad to share it. They already got the rope ready, don't they? As if summoned by the word, a shout went up outside. Someone jostled a lantern. A child cried. The door swung wider, letting in more of the crowd, more heat from bodies pressed close. In the crush, a lamp crashed against the wall. Flame licked up the curtain as if it had been waiting for exactly this moment. It happened fast and stupidly, the way big disasters often do. A curtain too dry from summer. A lamp hung too long in the same place. A flustered hand grabbing for it and catching hot glass instead. Fire jumped from fabric to wood to the polished curve of the banister to the dry wreath hanging by the door. Elise screamed. The cook dropped her apron and ran for the kitchen pump. Someone knocked into Isaiah's stool. He grabbed the door frame to keep from falling. Neighbors pressed closer, some to help, some to watch better. Smoke burrowed into the hall, thick and black. Heat rose in a wave. Water, someone shouted. "Get water, you idiots!" People ran. Buckets clanged. Voices collided in panic. On the stairs, Samson tightened his grip. "Mrs.," he said hoarsely. "We got to go back." Thaddeus barked through the smoke. "Take her back upstairs. I'll handle this." Lavinia coughed, lungs burning. Through the haze, she saw Thaddeus's back as he shouted orders, gesturing, organizing. For a moment, he looked like the commander he liked to imagine himself to be. Then Lavinia realized something colder than smoke. The back stairs were narrower, darker, easier to make a man fall, easier to make a man disappear. The front door, Lavinia rasped in Samson's ear. "Take me out the front. Through them, through all of them." "Mrs. If I'm going to burn," she said, voice torn by smoke, "I won't do it in the dark." Samson hesitated for one heartbeat. 1, 2, then turned. Muscles screamed. He began down toward the front, toward the fire and the crowd and the story waiting to be written. Thaddeus whirled. "Where are you going?" he bellowed. "Out!" Lavinia coughed. "Samson, go!" Samson went. He carried her past the blazing curtain, shielding her face with his shoulder. Sparks bit into his shirt. Someone collided with him, but his grip did not loosen. He took the last few steps faster than he ever had, boots thudding hard. When they burst onto the porch, the crowd gasped as one organism. The house behind them bled smoke and flame. The night was lit orange. Samson stood at the top step, Lavinia in his arms framed against the burning doorway like a painting someone would make 30 years later and hang in a museum without either of their names. He descended slowly the way he had come down the inside stairs 100 times before. But this time he did not lower his eyes. He stared straight ahead through the wall of faces. He made them see him. "Look," Lavinia choked out, voice ragged. "This is what you all wanted, isn't it? A woman in a slave's arms. Here I am, not in shadows, not whispered about. The only reason he touches me is because if he doesn't, I die where you like to gossip." A woman sobbed. Another crossed herself. A man spat, but his hand on the rope at his belt never moved. Samson carried Lavinia onto the grass far enough that falling embers wouldn't reach them. Elise and the cook ran to her, hauling her from Samson's arms, supporting her as her knees threatened to fold. Neither recoiled from the fact those same arms had just saved her life in full view of God and gossip. Their attention snapped back to the house, to the people still inside. Thaddeus's voice could be heard shouting orders from somewhere in the smoke. Someone said he'd gone upstairs for important papers. Someone said money. Someone said a man like him would rather rescue a ledger than a life, if it meant his pride stayed intact. The roof groaned. The chimney cracked. Flames found pockets of air and exploded out windows. Then, like the house, was finally tired of holding everything up the staircase. The one that broke Lavinia's body split down the middle and collapsed with a roar like an animal dying. "Major," someone screamed. "Major Harrow." No answer came. By dawn, Harrow House was gone. The sycamores along the drive stood blackened and dripping with dew. The air smelled of wet ash and panic. People wandered through ruins in a daze as if answers might be found under charcoal. They did not find Thaddeus Harrow. Some said he burned. Some said he ran. Some swore they saw him slip out the back while everyone watched the front porch, hat pulled, low bag under his arm. Men like Thaddeus had a talent for surviving messes they made. The world often made room for them. They did not find Samson either. He had stood in the yard through the worst of the fire, hauling buckets, dragging trunks, pushing back anyone foolish enough to run into flame. And then somewhere between the third crash of the roof and the first pale light of morning, he vanished. Isaiah said nothing. Elise found a scrap of paper pinned to the sycamore by the drive, weighted with a small stone. The edges were browned as if it had passed near heat. The writing was shaky but careful. I carried you as far as I could. The rest you must walk. Elise took it to Lavinia. Lavinia sat wrapped in a blanket on a broken chair in the overseer's cottage. Her hair smelled of smoke no matter how many times Elise rinsed it. Her face was gray with exhaustion. Lavinia read the note once, twice. Then she closed her eyes like she'd been stabbed not by cruelty, but by the tenderness of a line that refused to pretend saving someone is the same as owning them. She folded the note and tucked it beside the page she'd written the night before, the one she left out on purpose, the one the fire somehow spared. The land did not care that the house was gone. Cotton still pushed up through ash. The sun still baked red clay. The court still wanted debts paid. Lawyers came pinched and precise and cut the Harrow estate into pieces to satisfy numbers and ledgers. Lavinia was left with less than she'd been born to expect, and more than some would have given her enough land to work enough broken buildings, to rebuild enough ghosts to fill 100 nights. People advised her to leave. Go back to Charleston, they said. Start over. This place is cursed. Folks will never let you forget what they think happened here. Lavinia thought of the porch, the fire behind her, Samson carrying her through a wall of faces that wanted a scandal more than they wanted a reason. She thought of the staircase splintering. She thought of the rope that never quite found a neck that night, though it had been eager. I will not let them keep the story and take the land too, she said. If they're going to talk about me for the rest of their lives, they can do it under my trees. So she stayed. She lived in the overseer's cottage at the edge of the property, close enough to see the charred foundation of the old house, far enough she could sleep without smelling smoke every time the wind shifted. She hired an overseer for a season, then fired him when she caught him with a whip in his hand. Slowly, quietly, she began shifting control to men who had once been listed as property in the same ledgers as her dresses. The town called her mad. They said she'd thrown away structure. They said she sat at dusk, staring toward the blackened place where the stairs once stood, as if waiting for a man who would never come. Years blurred, stories hardened. People told it simple as a proverb. She let him carry her every night. What did she expect would happen? Fire from heaven. Judgment. They left out the part where the fire started with someone else's clumsy hand. They left out the whip and the fall and the lost child. They left out the note on the tree. They left out mercy because mercy is inconvenient when you're building a moral lesson you want to aim like a weapon. Way down the line, when Cora was old and ill, she called her granddaughter to her bedside with the urgency people used for priests. I told that story wrong, Cora whispered, lips cracked, eyes wet with something that wasn't only sickness. I told it to make myself important, to make them listen. I left out what hurt. You find out what really happened. Write it down, else they'll hang the wrong people again. Her granddaughter's name was Eliza. Eliza had grown up on the story the way children grow up on bedtime tales, trimmed, sharpened, wrapped in a moral that fits neatly in one sentence. That white lady was wild. She forgot her place. God burned her house to remind her. Eliza heard it in kitchens, schoolyards, church steps. It was told with laughter, with outrage, with the easy cruelty of a community that enjoyed a cautionary tale because it meant the world still had a clear line between us and them. After Cora died, Eliza found the satchel. It was tucked in the back of an old trunk under yellowed doilies and buttonless gloves. Inside were loose papers tied with string receipts, letters, a crumbling scrap of what might once have been curtain. Near the bottom was a page edges, charred ink, faded but legible. I let him carry me. It read, because if I denied his hands, I would deny the only moment each day when I was not at the mercy of the floor, or the stairs, or the man whose temper broke them. The town sees only the shape of our bodies on the steps. They will never forgive me for allowing him near me to save my life. They will forgive my husband anything. Eliza sat in stale archive light and read that sentence over and over until the words blurred. No one had told it like that. Nobody had mentioned mercy. Nobody had mentioned guilt. Nobody had mentioned how a woman's body could be both a battleground and a billboard. Eliza turned the paper over. On the back, in a different hand, were the words from the note pinned to the sycamore, copied out, as if someone wanted to keep them together, as if someone wanted history to be forced to sit in the same room with truth. I carried you as far as I could. The rest, you must walk. Eliza thought of all the versions she'd heard, the lurid ones full of whispered suggestions, the pious ones where Lavinia was punishment, the angry ones where Samson was a warning about forgetting your place. None of them included these lines. She closed her eyes and pictured the staircase wood worn by countless steps. The banister curved like a question the spot rumor claimed a woman had let herself be carried like a lover. Now she saw it differently. A battlefield where one woman refused to let the whole story be told in someone else's words, even if it meant the house and her life as she knew it had to burn. Eliza didn't have the power to rewrite courthouse books. Those still said house fire. Church records still thanked God for correction. The town still preferred a scandal because scandals are easy and ugly truths demand you choose a side. But Eliza could choose which story she told next. So she did. She told the version with the blood on the floor and the doctor's verdict with Isaiah's warning about necks and ropes, with the note on the tree smudged by someone's fingers, with the way Samson's back must have tensed under the gaze of an entire town. And because stories live longer when more mouths hold them, that version spread quiet at first, then stubborn. It didn't fix what was broken. It didn't resurrect what was lost. It didn't make the world fair. But it did one thing that mattered. It stopped pretending the wrong villain was the only villain. It stopped pretending power was invisible. It stopped pretending that bodies were rumors instead of lives. And if you're still here listening to Lavinia and Samson and Isaiah and all their ghosts, don't let this be just another rumor. You